Facebook Meta issued a statement again last night saying that they don't do business in China. Now, is that true? Facebook Meta is not doing business in China? Is that accurate?
That is not accurate, Chairman Hawley. Facebook has a $18.3 billion business in China. And to give just one example, in 2014, it launched Oculus in China with a strategy of playing dumb. And Oculus has continued to grow as a significant part of their business.
In fact, they have, since 2014, 2015, they have launched multiple apps in China, often without, well, always without seeking authorization from this government, not informing their shareholders, not informing Congress, not informing the public. And now they have employees in China. Is that accurate? They have a partnership with Tencent in China. Is that accurate? Their Oculus VR business is in China. Is that accurate? So tell me this, why has Facebook Meta been so obsessed, if I can use that word, with breaking into the Chinese market? What is this all about?
It is incredibly valuable for Meta.
Monetarily?
Absolutely.
Executives and employees cultivated relationships with members of the Chinese Communist Party?
Absolutely, Senator.
And this happened over a period of years?
This happened over many years.
And did members of the Facebook executive team or other employees at Facebook Meta ever brief members of the Chinese Communist Party?
Yes, Senator, regularly.
Exchanged information with them?
Yes, Senator.
What are some of the topics that they covered in these briefings?
I mean, it's incredibly broad. So you had meetings at the top executive level, so Mark and Cheryl, and you had meetings, all the way down to, regular engineers who would be providing briefings on cutting-edge technology like facial recognition, which is obviously very helpful to the Chinese Communist Party.
Did Meta have any agreements with the Communist Chinese government to provide them with the data? And if so, do they still have those agreements, as far as you can tell that you've been going from the company?
So part of the challenge, as I mentioned, was building the internet infrastructure to support their China ambitions. And it was through that internet infrastructure that they would gain access to potentially American citizens' data. I think, again, this is another very good area to investigate and get further information directly from the company.
In order to operate in China, the Communist Party requires American companies to register with authorities and host servers inside the country. And I think it's pretty well known that Chinese law requires that security services are allowed access to any data hosted within the country. Did any of Facebook's security team or its engineers raise concerns to management about Americans' private information being exposed to Chinese spying?
Yes, Senator, they did.
And how did they do that?
They documented their concern in a number of ways. They noted that this would happen, that the Chinese would get access to the data, and they also noted their concern in other discussions and other documentation, saying, my red line as a security engineer is to not be comfortable with this, but my red line is not Mark Zuckerberg's red line.
Maybe you can explain what you mean by that.
The engineer was saying that they were not comfortable with the way the China project was structured that would allow the Chinese Communist Party to potentially access American citizens' data. But in saying that, they noted that, that's a red line for me as a security engineer. That's not Mark Zuckerberg's red line.
Did you sense he had any red line?
I did not.
If he did, you don't know what it was?
I don't.
If you have more information related to these spying risks, would you be willing to share it with the committee?
I would, Senator.
And Mark Zuckerberg was knowledgeable about the planning and do you know whether he was knowledgeable about the risks as well?
My understanding is that the risk is the hardest part of the plan. So it's unthinkable that he was not aware of the risk.
Nothing happened here without his approval and knowledge.
This was a project unlike any other project I worked on during my time at Meta, in that it was so centrally led by Mark Zuckerberg, and he was so personally invested in this project. He learnt Mandarin. He traveled to China more than any other country. He had weekly Mandarin sessions with employees. It's hard to overstate how different this project was to any other project I experienced in my many years at the company.
So there would be no credibility to his denying that he knew about the risks, he knew about the concerns raised by his engineers and his China team, and he was intimately involved in not only the planning and the engineering, but also in taking those risks.
Senator, he was traveling to Beijing.
Your book, you wrote that Facebook remade American news media by inserting Facebook at the center of it, driving down ad rates for newspapers, and distributing their stories using their content to boost time spent on Facebook. Senator Kennedy and I, as a side, have a bill to push negotiations for the price of content, which I think is really important. But could you explain how Meta uses news content to boost time spent on Facebook, and how that allows Facebook to sell more advertising without paying publishers their fair share?
I mean, the key thing that Meta is obsessed with is engagement. It's keeping people's attention on the services that Meta owns for as long as possible, using whatever tools it can. So definitely the work of publishers and the work of many dedicated journalists, and also increasingly they're utilizing AI to keep engagement, often AI based on the work of journalists and authors.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And when discussing ways to promote a healthy news market, you quoted Mr. Zuckerberg as saying, quote, "You're compromising with the dying industry rather than dominating it, crushing it." What do you see with your experience as a consequence of Facebook is allowed to dominate and crush an independent news media?
I think every citizen has seen the consequences of these actions, and I think we're all the poorer for it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. When discussing the role that political ads play in Facebook's business, you observed that peddling outrage and stretching the truth were just part of the game, and that outrage is a lucrative business for Facebook. I care about this a lot, just being in this business of politics, and how we know how negativity is awarded online, not just Facebook, in all of the algorithms in these companies, and it's actually completely changed the ecosystem that we work in. Can you elaborate more on how stoking political outrage is profitable for Facebook and ramifications for democracy?
I think we're all living with the consequences of this every day. As I said before, what this company wants is to dominate as much time and attention as it can of every, not just in this country, as many billions as they can. And what they've learned is that outrage is a really good way to do that, but it doesn't, whatever it takes to have people glued to these services in their power, in their thrall,